And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today we're taking a look at 5 Points Gangs of New York, a new game from Mayfair, which is based on the fighting that happened, the politicking that happened in New York around the turn of the last century, although the picture looks like it comes from the movie Gangs of New York. In this game, it's a vicious area control style game where you're trying to have the most votes in different city districts. Let me show you. Setup for 5 points is going to be different each time. You're going to build a neighborhood made up of 4 different color, well, you're going to build the city basically made up of 4 different color neighborhoods, and they have to be touching different tiles, but you can make it any shape you want. The number of neighborhoods is depending on the number in the game. For example, there's 17 neighborhoods here. This would be a 5-player game. You're also going to put 2 buildings out on the board, and there is actually a pile of buildings, and each building has a special power, but you're only using 2 per game. So you'll have a lot of, basically, a chance to redo different, the game will have different variety. Not to mention there's lots of different color neighborhoods that you won't have. You always have at least one of every color, but maybe more than that. Players are going to get a certain number of bosses, these big, large wooden people here, and then you're also going to start with some cubes, but you don't get all your cubes. Here in your headquarters, you'll get your bosses, all 5 of your bosses, and then you'll get these here, which are your people that are out there in the polls voting. At the beginning of each round of the game, you're going to take 4 special tiles and place these tiles here next to the board. Alright, these tiles are tiles that you can bid on basically. Now, what players are going to do on their turn is you are either going to play or pass. When you play, you'll take one of your cubes and you place it on any neighborhood out on the board. It doesn't matter where you place them, and as the game progresses, there'll be different cubes from players placed on these, and you can place as many as you want on the different spots on the board, but you can only place one at a time on your turn. You also can bid on one of these tiles by putting these cubes over here. When you put cubes there, you can put as many cubes as you want as long as it's more than the last person. So let's say blue places 3 here. He wants this tile. So now it's 3-2. Later on, if red has more cubes, red can outbid blue by adding 2 more to its bid, and you will keep going. At the end of a round, whoever bids the highest is going to lose all their cubes and win the tile. The other people will get their cubes back. When you pass, you're going to take one of these really small tiles. They should have made these bigger. And speaking of which, once again, Mayfair is doing their thing where they're only printing on one side of the tiles, which is really, I don't know, it makes the game a pain to sort out. I wish they wouldn't do it, but it is what it is. When you pass, you are going to take the top tile of this stack. So in a 5-player game, we have 7, 6, 5, 4, and 2. When you take that tile, you will immediately get that many cubes from the burrows, or basically from the pile, and add them over to your headquarters. So this is how you get more cubes. So whoever passes first will have more cubes for future rounds, and whoever passes last obviously is only going to get 2 of those cubes. When all players pass, we're going to see which of these neighborhoods is going to have an election. The one that has the most cubes total is going to have an election. If there's tie for the most cubes, then 2 neighborhoods will have an election. Also, each of these tiles will be auctioned off, and whoever has put the most cubes there will get each tile, and they do special things. For example, this gives you 2 votes in an election. This gives you 3 votes in a red election, 3 votes in a blue election, and your bosses will give you extra votes depending on how many you have on the board. And there's lots of different special tiles that you'll be able to do. Also, players will be able to utilize, if they control a region where there is a building, they'll be able to use that building. This one gives extra votes. This one gives 2 victory points from a victory point pile here. And then the election. So for example, the election's here. Purple wins the election. When an election is over, players are going to remove their cubes, and whoever wins the election is going to place a boss in that area. If there already is a boss in that area, they would remove that one. Then, after the election, each of the adjacent spots, and there can be up to 4 adjacent spots, is going to be checked. And whoever has the most cubes in one of those, so for example here, let's say red has the most cubes in this green neighborhood, we'll take a small token that matches the color of that neighborhood. And so up to 4 of those tokens can be given out per election, and if there's multiple elections, then multiple of those tokens can be given out. And then you go into the next round, and the player who passed first or passed last starts at the next phase. And so you keep on doing this until one player wins. Now, there are several ways for the game to end. One way is by automatic victory. If you get all of your bosses out on the board, you win. Now that's difficult to do. Remember, there's 17 neighborhoods here in a 5-player game. And if I get all 5 of mine out, everyone else has let me go. If they see that I have 4 out on the board, for example, they could try to have an election in one of the spots where I have one of my bosses to kick my boss out and put someone else's boss in. Another way could be if there is a boss on every single neighborhood in the city, or if one of these piles up here runs out of one of the different colors. When that happens, then the game ends and there is scoring. Each boss that a player has on the board is worth 5 points each. Each of these control markers is worth 2 points. However, a set of all 4 colors gives you an extra 5 points. So if I have one of each color, I'll get 5 points plus 2 points for each. So that's 13 points if I get all 4. And then any victory points that I've gotten over the course of the game for whatever reason are worth the victory points on them. Whoever has the most victory points wins in that situation. So you can win automatically, or you can win by getting the most points. This game was designed by Andreas Stedding, and he's becoming a designer that I'm really starting to like because of his simple games that offer more depth. You know, there's a lot of Euro game designers out there who are designing games that are heavier and more involved, but this game's simple. There's Area Control is a game that a lot of people have done over the years, but in the last several years, it hasn't been touched much. I mean, we have El Grande, which is a classic in this genre, but I haven't seen many other people really try to tackle it that often. And I think it's a good one because Area Control is a mechanic I enjoy because of its innate viciousness. I'm going to put people there, I'm going to put people here. This game adds a little bit more to it because there's a couple things. One, the most cubes is where the election's going to be. So you can add cubes to another spot, even if you don't worry about that election, just to keep an election happening from somewhere else. And wherever that election happens is a big deal, of course, but the 4 that are next to it, you might be next to certain elections. So you want to see an election there so that you can win those tokens next to it. All that, and there's bidding for these tiles, which can be very useful. But you know, if you bid on one of these tiles, you're going to have to bid at least 1 cube, likely more, to win them, which are cubes that you could be putting on the board to control the different areas. And then you have to take into account the different buildings, you've taken into account where the things are, but you also want to pass as quickly as you can sometimes so that you can have a whole lot of cubes so that the next turn you can just put cubes all over the board. There's a lot of interesting things going on. It works well with 3 players, but I really enjoyed it with 5. With 5, there was just so much fighting going back and forth, and you know, trying to get the bosses out. Getting that 5th boss out on the board is a big deal because that's an automatic win. So as soon as a player gets into striking distance of that, the other players are going to be working against him, while at the same time you're trying to get as many points as you can because you're going to assume that no one is going to win that way. I wish the component quality was a little greater. It's not bad enough to detract me from the game. It works well, and I do like that there's the tiles in front of you. The headquarters doesn't matter that much, but it has a place for you to put cubes, and as you're spreading out over the city and putting your bosses out and using special abilities, there's a lot of mob slang, I guess, that's thrown around, and you know, political grandiose stuff, people trash talking each other, and it's very interactive, the game, because you're constantly going after each other, and I like that. It's a little mean, not dramatically mean, but it's a little mean, and that's it's a good example of the genre. So I don't know that the theme of the gangs of New York comes through as great as I like it to, although it's kind of innate in the mechanics of Area Control, you know, there's that fighting for politicking. But at the same time, it does a good job in this genre, and is certainly one that I would recommend that people check out. 5 points, The Gangs of New York.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door.